You may not have done the math, but I have. Next Thursday will make 6 years to the day since she injected Michael Cochran with insulin in his home. 5 days after that will be 6 years since Michael Cochran left this earth. 6 years since 2 children lost their father. 6 years since this woman, Donna Bolt, and this man, Ed Bolt, lost their son. 6 years since they were able to see him for the last time. Michael and the people that loved him deserve to have the most thorough investigation that we could conduct. And we've done that. We've done everything we could to show you what really happened to Michael. These people have waited long enough for justice. Michael has waited long enough for justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you at this time to deliver that justice and to find his wife, Natalie Cochran, guilty of the first-degree murder of Michael Cochran. Thank you.
The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree.
Welcome, guys. Now, there's a saying that money is the root of all evil. And my question is, how far would someone go just for the money? And what decisions would people make, or some people make, when they have to choose between making and protecting money at the expense of their loved ones, and rather forgoing the money just to maintain the relationships and love that they are supposed to show their so-called loved ones? This question and these profound statements epitomizes what today's case is going to be about. It's coming from the United States. And as you saw at the beginning of the video, a woman has been sentenced to life without parole after being sentenced initially to 11 years for a previous crime that was related to the second one for which she got the life sentence. Who is this woman? What were the crimes that she committed, first of all, to get the 11 years, and secondly, to get the life sentence without parole? This case is going to show you how evil and wicked and secretive people can be when it comes to the issue of money, even ready to go to the expense or the extent of taking the lives of those they may have even promised to love and cherish till death do them part. When in fact, when it comes to greed, the same person who made that vow could be the same person who brings death to you and parts with you in death. So, the whole thing started in February of 2019. 38-year-old Michael Cochran died all of a sudden. He wasn't somebody who had any history of sicknesses or had any bad medical records. All of a sudden, this strong-bodied, active 38-year-old man called Michael Cochran just up and died. Now, investigations commenced into it. It dragged for some time, and it went to trial, where his wife was being treated as a suspect because prosecutors were of the view that he had been poisoned by his wife with insulin. And then it will beg the question, why would his own wife do that? Again, prosecutors went further to state that the motive for what they are accusing his wife of doing was that she took his life so she could conceal her over $2.5 million Ponzi scheme, which she was operating from 2017 to 2019. Now, at this point, it wasn't funny anymore, because how can you come and accuse a grieving widow of, first of all, being the mastermind behind the Ponzi scheme, and then further going on to even accuse her of being the one behind the death of her husband, with the motive being that she took his life just so she would cover up the same Ponzi scheme you're accusing her of. It's like giving somebody 2 slaps and telling the person not to complain or cry. That was how it felt. But then, it will turn out that sometimes you just have to be patient and sit on the fence whilst investigations proceed. And as time goes on and things begin to unravel, the snakes would show. So, the whole thing began in 2017, where the woman at the center of this, called Natalie Cochran, she was the wife of Michael Cochran. And per reports, Natalie's scheme began in 2017 after the Cochrans registered a new company called Tactical Solutions Group. That's TSG for short. They registered this company in 2017. Now, they said that the company focused on bidding on contracts to sell weapons and other goods to the US government. It seemed like it's a really big deal. And per this, Natalie, who was actually a pharmacist at the time, decided to quit her pharmacist job and commit fully to this family business. It would seem like an honorable thing to do, right? Well, time will tell. So, per how they set up the whole arrangement, Natalie was supposed to be the majority owner, whilst her husband, Michael Cochran, held the minority stake in this business. From this point, Natalie approached friends and family to invest money in the company. She even convinced some of them to make 6-figure investments, which she drew by the promise of generous profits on high-dollar government contracts. Because no matter where you find yourself, I'm sure you appreciate the reality that if you are having to execute contracts from the government, usually it's very lucrative. And this was one of the high selling points that Natalie Cochran was using to entice friends and family to invest in their company. She even told friends and family that their business model was inspired by the 2016 dark comedy movie War Dogs. You know, I think that you begin to see the dark intelligence that Natalie has. She seems to be very manipulative, conniving, and would be more like a puppet master behind the scenes, if I should put it that way. Now, an investor would testify later that when Natalie told him that they were going to make all of their employees watch War Dogs as like an onboarding video, he went on to draw her attention to the fact that he hopes she realized that in War Dogs, the movie she is trying to make as an onboarding tool or a prerequisite for any employee they are onboarding to watch, actually ends with all the people in there going to jail, and he hopes she realizes that. But I think that it wasn't just about the movie. This was Natalie's true nature showing, because she resonated with something in that movie that suited what she was trying to do. But this investor didn't take it serious. Now, by all outward appearances, Natalie and Michael's new business seemed to be thriving, and family and friends noticed that their lifestyle seemed to transform almost overnight. Per this, the Cochrans acquired new real estate, eventually owning 3 homes, as well as several vehicles, including motorcycles and even an antique vehicle. In addition to this, the family, they were even vacationing to Paris and Hawaii. Now, if you're an investor and you invested in a company at a time where you knew the lifestyle status and tastes of the major and minor shareholders in the company, and immediately after you invested your huge sums of money, you notice that they have lifestyle changes, please, that is the first red flag you shouldn't ignore. There's a strong possibility they are misappropriating funds or embezzling funds. Some way, somehow, people didn't really notice the link between this. So it went on. Now, on an application for a $100,000 loan from a local bank, Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran reported that their business assets exceeded $500 million US. That is a whole lot. That is a whole lot. That's like $500 million. Yeah, that's like $500 million. But then, fast forward, questions began to arise after an investigation was launched into funds going missing from a middle school baseball league. Because guess what? That league raised $15,000 US through a fundraiser, and Natalie Cochran was its treasurer, and she oversaw the bank accounts. I'm sure you see where this is going. Now, members of the league committee became suspicious when almost all the money disappeared from their account. And then, private investigator by name James Queensberry was brought in to track down the missing money. According to the findings, it is reported that there were purchases to TJ Maxx, purchases to Olive Garden, and then, as he started adding it up, it seemed like about $32,000 US had just left in one night. This was very, very suspicious, and it didn't add up. And according to this investigator, Natalie Cochran was the only person who had access to these bank accounts. Now, these findings raised concerns for some members of the league who were also investors in the business of Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran's government contracting business. And I'm surprised they just left it at that. 2 red flags. I think that this is where we need to start taking lessons, because you need to separate personal relationships from business relationships and separate emotions from business decisions. You've seen 2 red flags: change in lifestyle and a clear case of one of the owners of the business, in actual fact the major shareholding owner, being caught up in an embezzlement issue, and you still don't pull out. You don't blow the whistle. So it went on, and at a point when investors questioned her about returns they had been promised, Natalie Cochran offered a variety of excuses for the delayed payments, including a federal government shutdown and cancer treatments she claimed to be undergoing. You see where this is going? Now, the Cochran business wasn't what it appeared to be eventually, and people were now starting to catch on. But at this time, their monies were already deep into the business with no possibility of it being retrieved. And eventually, when the secrets behind the scheme were uncovered, things became much worse than anyone could have ever imagined. Because the company, by name Tactical Solutions Group, turned out to be a major deception. In fact, there were no government contracts. There were never any contracts at all. There were never any bids made by the company for even any contracts. The company existed only on paper. It was a Ponzi scheme. No money was being generated. Early investors were paid with funds from new investors. Yeah, so it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. In a nutshell, the Cochran business model appeared to be based on defrauding friends and family, many of whom have known Natalie and Michael Cochran their entire lives. Now, investigators at a point had to deal with the question or the possibility as to whether Michael Cochran, who was now deceased with the suspicion that his wife had taken his life, was actually part of the scheme, or it was just Natalie Cochran who was scamming people. To this, investigators concluded that Michael Cochran did not know that his wife, Natalie Cochran, was scamming people, and that Michael had asked Natalie the same questions as investors who were trying to get back their money. at the time these questions were coming up. Investigators claimed that Michael believed they had government contracts and money due and that the government was holding their money. So if this is accurate, then it means that she was even scamming her husband too, who is also the minor partner in the business, like he holds the lesser shares. So this woman was literally scamming everybody, including her own husband. Now, you begin to see where this is going. Fast forward, on the morning of the 6th of February 2019, the Cochrans planned to fly to Virginia for a meeting with representatives from Bank of America. I believe that this is where things began to get dangerous, because at this time the Ponzi scheme has been unraveled and it looks like SHIT is going to hit the fan. And guess what? Although they were supposed to travel on the morning of 6th of February 2019 for a meeting with the representatives from Bank of America, this trip never actually happened, because Natalie told friends that she was sick with flu, and then she texted a photo of Michael unconscious in the kitchen of the family's home. This brought friends rushing to the Cochran home to check on Michael, but then Natalie downplayed the severity of Michael's medical situation and insisted that he should just leave or be left to sleep it off. However, her friends were urging her to take him to a hospital, but she said that no, her husband didn't want to go to the hospital. However, unfortunately, after several hours, an unresponsive Michael Cochran was then finally taken to a nearby hospital where doctors would eventually determine that he was in fact suffering from cerebral edema, which translates medically as he had a swelling on his brain. It was also determined by doctors that his blood glucose level was 21, and that was a dangerously low reading. Michael Cochran received treatment for 5 days but never regained consciousness. Unfortunately, he died on the 11th of February 2019, and that was the end of him. So you now see how this is linked. But it didn't end there. The newly widowed Natalie Cochran still continued to run this business. Yeah, she did. 4 months after her husband's death, she arranged a deal to sell nearly half of Tactical Solutions Group for $4 million. However, on the 25th of June 2019, before this sale could proceed, the police executed a search warrant on the Cochran residence. This is because they had been tipped off about TSG after speaking with an investor who complained about not being able to recover his investment. Now, I feel this complaint came too late. Sometimes it's better to blow the whistle early and investigations commence to find out, okay, it was a wrong alarm, everything is fine. I believe that is even better than waiting and blowing the whistle at a time when the damage has already been done. Now, when they raided, the police would later report that they had more than enough evidence and documentation to proceed with indictment. And so they did. Now, at this point, Natalie faced 26 charges related to the fraud she seemingly was caught up in. And to these, she pleaded she wasn't guilty, but her investors feared they would never recover the hundreds of thousands of US dollars they had put into the business. After pleading guilty in 2020 to an unlawful monetary transaction and to wire fraud related to the Ponzi scheme, Natalie Cochran was then sentenced to 11 years in federal prison and ordered to pay back $2.5 million US she had stolen from her investors. Natalie called the alleged financial crimes related to the Little League bogus, and ultimately, authorities decided not to charge her with anything related to the Little League. So, at this point, one would feel like, okay, she ran a Ponzi scheme, she defrauded her loved ones and friends. Now she's been convicted, justice has been served. But there was something else. There was a second leg of this issue which seemed a bit murky and unsettled, and the feds were not going to let it slide. And that was to do with the unexplained death of her husband, Michael Cochran. So, with the federal case against TSG now settled, a state investigation into Michael's unexplained death began to heat up. Now, detectives originally thought Michael Cochran had died from natural causes. But then, after a search warrant in the fraud case led investigators to the Cochran home, they unexpectedly found a vial of insulin in the fridge. And this led detectives to look into Michael's death much more deeper. Per this, a judge granted an order to exhume the remains of Michael Cochran for examination and testing. And I commend this judge for that. You know, sometimes you need to go a bit extra to uncover the truth. Sometimes some people are not willing. Some people rather prefer to just leave it and let things be. And some evil people get to sneak and slip away because of that. But this judge did the most, and kudos to him. And per that, in November of 2021, just 6 months into Natalie's prison term, Natalie was then indicted for the first-degree murder of her husband, Michael Cochran. At her trial, state prosecutors alleged that Natalie injected Michael Cochran, her husband, with insulin, which is a diabetes medicine that can cause life-threatening complications if not used properly. Prosecutors then argued, and investigators testified, that Natalie killed Michael to prevent her Ponzi scheme from being exposed at a bank meeting scheduled for the day Michael fell ill. And it makes sense to me, because her husband was completely fine, but was now asking questions about the Ponzi scheme, same questions the investors were asking. And on the same day, they were to travel to meet the bank for a meeting with regards to the financial transactions and relationship they had with the bank, which would trace back to the Ponzi scheme. Michael suddenly conveniently falls ill and eventually would die without talking about the Ponzi scheme again. That certainly smells of foul play. A foul play would favor Natalie so much because dead men tell no tales. Now, investigators asserted that Michael Cochran was not involved in the Ponzi scheme and that he believed their business was actually legitimate. To this, Natalie's defense attorneys argued that while she may have taken millions in the Ponzi scheme, she did not unalive her husband, and they even claimed that Michael Cochran was not in good health and took insulin as part of his bodybuilding efforts. Fast forward, the defense from Natalie's team was unsuccessful, and I'm happy it was. It was not successful, and Natalie Cochran faced the law to the extent that it had to go. She was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for the unaliving of her husband, Michael Cochran. Now, this case is groundbreaking, and it shows the extent to which people would go to for what they think is important to them, even at the expense of people's lives. If everything that Natalie is said to have done is true, that she actually did, or the verdict has been given, but sometimes some verdicts could be overturned later on. But if she actually did this, think that it's just pure evil. And they were married for about 19 years. They had kids between them. That tells you how dark the minds and hearts of some people can become, especially when it has to do with money. Because sometimes, as has happened here, Natalie is legally married to Michael, so they exchanged vows. She actually looked in his eyes and told him, "I'll love you, I'll honor you, I'll respect you until death do us part. I'll be sincere to you until death do us part." But little did Michael know that she was going to be the angel of death that will make death do them part, just so she could cover up her Ponzi scheme. And even after his death, she was still looking to cash out from it. That is really cold. My heart goes out to the family of Michael Cochran and even Natalie Cochran, because at this point, the children will be caught in the middle, and that is usually the sad part of these things. Because when it gets to this point, they've lost their father, and technically, they've also lost their mom. And the story is out there. How do they move on from these things? They will grow up to come and see it and appreciate it. Even their daughter had to testify, and she was surprisingly testifying to protect her mom. I don't know what the basis of that was, but I respect that, and I respect her for her decisions. But like I've always been saying, I think that it's very important that we start influencing society to take decisions with good thoughts, good principles, decisions backed by ethics, backed by emotional control, backed by emotional intelligence, wisdom, well thought out, and selfless principles. Because it's beginning to look like the moment somebody thinks there's something in it for them, they don't care about the consequence on others, even to the extent of the risk of people losing their lives. They would go out and do what they want to do. And I think that culture, or lack of culture, is really destroying the fabric of the world. What do you think about this case? Is there any other thing about it that I didn't touch on? You can let me know in the comment section. Subscribe if you are yet to do so. Hit on the post notification. Share the video. We are learning and growing together. I'll catch you on the next one. Stay safe out there.